If an organization is short-sighted enough to say they need to just sit down and shut up and enjoy their employment, then that's great. And enjoy the next 10 years, because they'll be the last 10 years of your organization. People are not going to want to work with you.
Trials, tribulations, mistakes, barriers, successes and failures. Hear it here firsthand from those that have grown billion-dollar businesses to those that are just starting out. Winner of the Campaign Publishing Award for Best Business Podcast in the UK, Success is in the Mind is the only place where you can get a sense of business reality in a world full of idealism. Everyone claims to be an entrepreneur, but can everyone live up to the title? What does it take to start a business, to get your product into a high street store or grow a well-managed team? I'm Oliver Bruce, founder and entrepreneur myself. Join me as I interview business leaders and founders from across the globe, delving into what makes them tick, their differentiators and intrinsic motivators. This is Success is in the Mind. Thank you so much to our headline sponsors for the year, Capsule Cover. Capsule Cover, a specialist insurance partner to growth businesses, supports some of the UK's most innovative and ambitious companies. Sponsoring each and every one of our podcasts, we're on a journey with Capsule, and so should you be. If you're a scale-up or an ambitious, high-growth business, check out how Capsule Cover can help you with bespoke insurance solutions. Inquire via capsulecover.com and quote Success22. On today's episode, we've got London-based wellbeing tech platform Juno, which focuses on delivering workplace benefits and employee wellbeing in a world that's becoming ever more connected. With its own online currency for employees and the increasing rhetoric from businesses and organisations globally around the importance of mental health, Juno is leading the way on the ever-changing landscape for work-life balance post-COVID. Set up in January 2019 by Ali Fekaiki after leaving his job due to burnout, Juno connects employees to hundreds of globally available products, services and experiences, all aimed at improving well-being and mental health. Ladies and gentlemen, Ali Fekaiki.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Ali, you studied at Epsom College, you went to University of Leeds, you did a Bachelor of Arts at exactly the same time that I did a Bachelor of Arts as well. You then worked for Getty Images. You're quite a creative guy. How did you get into the world of entrepreneurialism?
Yeah, good question. So my heart was set on being a filmmaker. I picked up a camera when I was in my teenage years, and then that was really my passion for, well, it ended up being about 8 years. But I think the truth is that it was very difficult for me to actually get any kind of job. And I say to my friends jokingly that I was a photographer and a filmmaker until I realized I had to make some money. But then I chose to be an entrepreneur, which is totally antithetical to that.
Yeah.
So look, I mean, when I graduated, I wanted to follow my dream of being a filmmaker and gave up, frankly, and translated those skills into marketing in startups. So you still get the autonomy, obviously, because a startup just kind of lets you run. But we let the filmmaking dream die, unfortunately.
I mean, upbringing wise, what did your parents do? Were they entrepreneurs as well? Did they work for somebody? What were their careers?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate actually. So my parents immigrated from Iraq. So that's where my heritage is from.
Right.
As you might have read in the news in the last 35 years, Iraq has had its political
some ups and
tribulations. So my dad came to the UK when he was 15. His dad was in political exile. My mum lived through the war, the Iran-Iraq war, came in 89, so 10 years after. They'd known each other from back home. I was fortunate that my mum was essentially a housewife, and I was able to kind of have my mum around while growing up. Although she, to this day, she's an acupuncturist now, but throughout my upbringing, she was really devoted to caring for others. So when I was a kid, she was a carer for elderly people, for disabled people, just volunteering. And now she works in a nursery. So there's that element of care that has sort of permeated her life.
Yes.
And as for my dad, he ran essentially what you would now call a digital agency, but in the 90s.
Yeah. So I mean, they were evidently entrepreneurs, I suppose, of their time in essence. And it's interesting that your mother worked in care, because the brand that you've just launched, Juno, has an element of wellbeing and care. Do you think that has permeated into your life now, and that's one of the reasons that you care so much about it?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, look, there's a lot of elements of you as a person permeate into the business that you build, whether you know that or not. Whether you're conscious of it or not. What I would say is I could probably link a few Iraqi cultural things to this, which is first and foremost, Iraq has been a place where authority has not always been respected, right? And societal issues are what you talk about around the dinner table. That's what I've been raised to be around, right? And so what that's translated as is a consciousness, a societal consciousness, or at least a concern, a sensitivity to how things could be done better. Entrepreneurially as well, if you also consider that when you come from a different culture, especially back in, let's say, the 80s and 90s, I don't know, fresh off the boat, let's say colloquially, whether working in an organization is always going to be the most harmonious experience, because there's a lot of assimilation that has to happen. And so the natural pivot, I suppose, is to start your own thing, to be your own boss, to just be on your own 2 feet. And there are a lot of Iraqi entrepreneurs that my parents' generation who just came from Iraq and started their own businesses. So there's that DNA that lends itself. And I think what that's translated as for me is that I don't just care about why, for example, my big chip on my shoulder is why we accept that stress and burnout are just like an endemic part of work. That for me is why I started the business. I just thought, well, we can do better than that. But I think that sort of chagrin is what drives people, not just Iraqis, obviously, but drives people.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason that you alluded to, obviously, with the stress and the burnout side of things, that's one of the main reasons that you packed your previous job in. But before you packed it in, you worked your way up, director of art, for instance, head of growth, head of user engagement. You were quite senior in all these businesses. You must have had a good salary. But then you just went, no, not for me. Burnout's not something that I want to be dealing with, and I want to go and help people. What went through your head when you packed it all in? Did you manage to kind of fund the business yourself?
Yeah, I mean, what went through my head is that this is kind of like not even a choice. I think, look, to be completely honest with you, there's always been an element of wanting to be an entrepreneur. To anyone listening who wants to be an entrepreneur, it's not fun. It's just not, and it's very fulfilling in the same way that anything difficult can be, but the passion for what you're trying to do has to be there. So when I kind of started thinking about Juno, it didn't feel, having already wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I'd always thought, okay, well, I don't really know what I want to do and where my strengths lie. But then when the idea for Juno came about, I just didn't really see another option, really. I mean, it felt like the idea had me rather than the other way around.
But if you're not having fun, Ali, why bother?
For me, this is fun. This is fun in a way. It's not fun objectively because you're stressed a lot and you have a lot of pressure and responsibility, and you have to deal with the ups and downs of any fledgling business. But there's nothing else I would rather do. I mean, literally, there's nothing else I'd rather do.
So you founded this business January 2019. Over the last couple of years, you've grown, over the last year, you've grown 600%. What does that look like in real terms? Because starting from nothing, it's very easy to grow by 600, 1,000, 2,000%. What does that actually look like in terms of revenue?
Essentially, before COVID, we had a little bit of an uphill battle. I mean, look, there was a lot of education that was required. You had to explain to clients, look, you are wasting so much money and time doing what you used to do, and employees just don't care. So why don't you, modernize your approach and reinvent it and come with us? And that wasn't always a fruitful conversation because at the time there wasn't a desperate need for it. We had clients, of course, making a couple grand a month, let's say, but COVID accelerated all of the things that we kind of noted that were going to be important, right? And those things were flexibility, autonomy, more of a focus on mental health. So as a result, I mean, post-COVID, and especially when the vaccine was announced, businesses were like, right, we've got a plan, and this is what we want to do. We want to invest more in our people. We're not going to show that we didn't learn anything. And so for us, that's meant that we started off the year with 11 clients. We now have over 150. Revenue-wise, doing very well. We are in a position to raise £5 to £7 million Series A. So let's just put it in those terms. So we've been very fortunate, and we've managed to do it with a very small team.
And you got 16 staff?
At the moment, 16. We were 10 a month ago. We've grown the headcount very, very quickly.
And how does someone, I suppose, having worked for somebody, transitioning into running your own business, but then again, it was the creative world. It's very difficult from a creative point of view to sometimes communicate things from a structural standpoint. How do you build a business, structure a business, hire people when actually you've only ever worked for somebody before? How did you learn that?
Yeah, good question. I worked for some amazing startups, and I was, a precocious 24-year-old that thought he knew everything. I learned a lot from those experiences, and that's why it is important to have worked for at least a number of years, because Juno would not be successful had I not had the experience at Clio, at Yolt, at Lockbox, at Poor Squad before that, in these very early stage businesses. You learn what's important and what's not important. You learn what to prioritize and what not to prioritize. What I think is a great skill as a leader, which I try to embrace, is the ability to put your hands up and say, maybe internally, maybe publicly, I'm working on myself. I've got a therapist, I've got a business coach, I've got a support network.
Have you got that, Ali? Is that hypothetical, or have you actually got business leaders?
Yeah, I've got all those things. I've got a therapist, I've got a business coach. I read a lot about this, but just a little caveat, which is that I fell into the trap of thinking I needed mentors and advisors, and I didn't at all. In fact, I wasted my time because advice is so non-contextual that you might as well just do without it. There's no better way to do something usually than your way, because it's authentic.
What if you don't know what you don't know, though, Ali? So if you bring on a mentor and an NED and they're going to help you scale, you don't necessarily know what is up ahead, but they've been through it before. So why would that not be valuable?
So this is just my personal experience.
Yeah.
In my experience, they don't add the value that they purport to, first and foremost. Advice that they can give is absolutely potentially valuable, but quite often lacks the context. So, for example, classic thing that will come up: hey, I'm having kind of issues with this person in the business, and they're not performing. And usually it's sack them. That's usually their advice. Well, just sack them. And that's because they've looked at the pain they went through in an organization, looked at it in hindsight and said, I should have just sacked them earlier, but completely removed the emotional context behind that, which is that it's not easy to just do that, and it's not always the right thing to do, and so on and so forth. So I'm using an example of a very kind of black and white, non-contextual piece of advice. I think one trap you can fall into is taking your pain, taking your stress and pressure and challenges, and looking to advisors and NEDs and going, here you go, have this on your lap, you solve it for me, and actually being dependent on other people to help you make decisions that you ought to be making.
I think that's right, Ali. I think you're right. I think mentors, NEDs, they're great, but you have to listen to them and you have to decide whether to take their advice or not. They're not there to fundamentally do it for you. And if you listen to them and you do it and you feel it's the wrong decision, then that's your fault, essentially, because they aren't going to drive the business for you. It's your business fundamentally. In terms of how you structure or your business kind of works from a financial point of view, Perkbox, for instance, you put money in, it's money, and that's that. You have Juno points, which is kind of like a digital currency to a certain extent. Was that idea derived from the world of crypto, the world of NFTs, and the way the world is going in terms of crypto? Or was it very much just something a bit like Avios points that you just thought, oh, it's nice to have X?
Well, it's the latter, but I do like the term, the Bitcoin for benefits, that one of our clients called Juno points the other day. Look, I mean...
Bitcoin for benefits.
There are three reasons why people don't use their benefits, right? The thing that they're offered. The first reason is that they're not tailored or relevant to them. So that's one thing which I think Perkbox can't get right. Frankly speaking, who cares about 10% off Toby's Carvery, which is the kind of thing that you can find on Perkbox.
I don't know. I quite like 10% off Toby Carvery.
Well, okay, fair enough. I'll pay full price. I'll give them the whole thing.
I'll take me out for dinner. You can pay. I'll come.
Okay. Fair enough.
Done,
fair enough.
perfect,
Find the nearest one between London and Cheltenham.
Easy.
So look, the first reason is that people don't use their benefits is because they're not tailored or relevant. They're not something that actually makes a difference to their lives ultimately. The second reason is that they don't even know that they have them on offer. They don't even know where to find them. They're not aware of the benefits that they have on offer. But the third reason, which is why we install Juno points, is that employees are not able to come out of pocket for benefits. So, being that wage stagnation is the way that it is, people are unlikely to want to fork out 50 quid, 60 quid a month for a gym membership, despite the fact that it's 40% off or whatever it might be. And so what we needed to do with Juno is essentially allow employers to fund the Juno accounts, but use Juno points because, number one, it's internationally recognizable. It's not like a difference in currency. It's one unified currency, which means that an HR team can just give it to everyone in one fell swoop. The other thing is it's fun, which is a big part of it. I mean, the reason why we're so successful in a way, or so far at least, is the brand. Employees look at this and go, oh, it's not another employee benefits platform. Cool. I'll look into it. I'll start using it. And that for us is a secret sauce because it's got to resonate with a modern professional. And Juno points kind of adds a little bit of that. So it is more like Avios, but maybe one day it can be on the blockchain.
In terms of when you did start, though, you pumped 650,000 odd quid into the business. Did you fund that as a kind of, first funding round? How did you get that money, or was that money that you had saved up?
Oh my God, I wish it was saved up. If I had that saved up, I wouldn't have done anything. I would have just gone and sat in Aruba.
Aruba, of all places.
I know. It looks. I saw some pictures earlier. It looked really, really nice. This morning, I was flicking through my phone and I was like, oh, maybe I should go there. No, I'm kidding. No, of course, it's not my own money. So look, when I first started the business, I asked myself, is this a business that needs venture funding or not? And what would be the merits versus, doing it profitably, let's say from day zero, or making it something that doesn't need investment. And I landed on it being venture funded because I could really see this potential being a global and huge opportunity. And thankfully, we got traction very early on. I built Juno using WordPress, for God's sake. I mean, I literally, used no code just to build it and get it off the ground because I thought, might as well just put out an MVP and see what happens. And so fortunately, that traction did attract some investors, and the 650K we got from Fuel Ventures was really, for me, a signal that we could build something massive.
In terms of the perception that you have when you worked for somebody from a mental health point of view and a well-being point of view, you must have quite a unique ability with your team to give them things above and beyond what the normal employer might do, simply because your business is a well-being brand. What does that perception look like?
Yeah, good question. So I think first and foremost, we instill a sense of autonomy, and part of that is to give people the ability to speak up when they do encounter issues. And this all comes from my own biases, right? I always found it really weird that I had to ask permission to take a day off, or ask permission to come in 2 hours late because of a doctor's appointment. I felt like I was back at school quite often. I always thought that the lack of autonomy was a driving factor because you feel like you don't have your own personal choices. A lot of the time you have to answer to someone else, and to me that's not something that we instill at Juno. So if you need to do something, whether that's look after the kids or take a day off because of your mental health, you just tell whoever you're working with, hey, I'm not going to be in today, and we just have to respect that. We set ourselves apart because, for me personally, I think the word benefits is old hat anyway, and perks makes me just want to vomit. It's just a horrible word. Looking after my mental health is not a perk. Seeing a therapist shouldn't be seen as a perk. What I try to instill with our own culture, but also outside of that to our clients, is that this is a whole new thing. This is a new category altogether. Forget perk box, forget all that stuff. This is about genuinely impactful support that an employer can give to employees, regardless of their circumstances, age, location, gender, needs, whatever it is. The other part of that is treating people like adults, and that kind of is linked as well. So let's start with that. That's the cultural aspect of it.
Do you think that can work for all businesses, though, Ali? Just telling somebody that you work with that you're not coming in tomorrow because your dog's got to go to the vets. What if you've got a meeting with your boss and you're not in? But how does that get communicated around the business as you grow?
But then that's up to you as an employee to make your own, to decide. We're all adults. I'm sure the Tories would want this, but you have to be 18 to work. Despite probably in the future they might lower that age to 12 or something. But anyway, the point is that in the workplace, you're all adults. and you should make your own adult decisions about whether or not it's appropriate. Ultimately, if you need to take time off because you're feeling stressed or feeling like you're under pressure.
Do you give people as much holiday as they want then? Do you go, take as many days off as you want? Holiday's not a problem as long as you get the job done. Or do you still make sure people have 33 days off a year?
So everyone gets 31 days paid holiday. That's not including bank holidays, which I think is very generous. And the reason why we have it, we don't say unlimited, is because unlimited has been proven that people take less holiday. There needs to be a framework, right? People embrace that. As long as you build it together, structure is absolutely, there's nothing wrong with structure. Structure actually can be very freeing. Knowing that you have a certain amount of time left to take holiday. Let's just say hypothetically, as you mentioned, I don't think that saying, well, you know what you need to get done, so do it whenever you want, is a good approach, because what that does is leave out people that thrive with a structure. So one of my biggest fears in the future is that people that are brilliant and smart and just as talented as anyone else, but need a structure, so need a framework, aren't people that are self-sufficient. They're let's say neurodiverse, just to put it in the new sort of modern words. The point is that those people are not going to get hired if we're going to hire people that are self-managers, that are self-sufficient, that you can just like leave and say, hey, your KPI is to do this by next week or whatever. You need to sign up this many companies or make sure that the engagement rate is X.
In terms of structure then, talk to me about what that looks like. You're sitting at the top. Who's below you?
Chief Commercial Officer. Beneath her is the account management and sales teams.
So it's quite lean then in terms of that C-suite. You're absolutely right. It is quite lean.
It's 2 people.
Yeah. And in terms of, I suppose, how you would delegate down then, are you still very, very much involved in the day-to-day running of the business? Or do you delegate through your Chief Brand Officer, for instance?
So, good question. It took me a really long time to get my fingers out of the pie and actually let people do their jobs. And part of that is because when you build a business, it is a baby. You're literally having a baby. Not literally, but figuratively having a baby.
Yes, equally as expensive as a baby as well sometimes.
And what you're doing when you hire senior people is essentially, it feels like hiring a nanny that you've never met before and leaving the baby with the childcare and hoping to God that you don't come back, and to a catastrophe, right?
So Michael Jackson situation.
That's your fear. Well, exactly. So look, that's your fear, right? And so getting over that fear takes a bit of time and a lot of trust. But now that it's been months now, I can be free to do this fundraise, which has been all consuming, and the business has gone from strength to strength, which is just a testament to the fact that I think CEOs sometimes tend to overestimate how much impact positively they can have on a business. And, they can walk away from it and take a holiday, for example, and find that the business has actually grown since they were gone.
Have you taken a holiday in the last 2 years? I know you mentioned Aruba earlier.
Yeah.
You have?
Yeah, not Aruba.
How long did you go away for?
Well, I sort of spent September.
The whole of September, a whole month. How do you switch off on holiday?
Not all of it. No. I was working. So I was working. I went to Spain for a bit and didn't work for a week. Switched off my emails.
Is that how you switch off?
Yeah. All of the notifications need to turn off. I just don't look at anything. Make sure I'm busy, basically, because if I'm idle, then I'll end up checking my emails. But then I went to Italy and I worked from Italy, which was really nice.
Very nice.
Look, I think having a change of scenery can also be really important because it changes your perspective slightly. I think a lot of your job as a founder is reliant on your perspective and on how you see things. And sometimes that can get poisoned because you are stressed and you are dealing with a lot of pressure and you're in the same environment. And so that leaks into everyone else. Whereas, being able to just go off and work from somewhere else for a few weeks or a day can change your way of thinking and your perception and your perspective.
So over the last 24 months of Juno then, what's been the hardest lesson that you've personally learned?
That's a good question. The hardest lesson, I suppose, is that you come into this thinking if it's not working, then you can change things and you should change things, whether that's personnel wise, whether that's strategically. And patience is actually much more advised because things can turn themselves around. One of the things that I suppose you learn, or I learn, is to be less reactive, to let bad things happen and let them run their course, and then sort of use that as an opportunity to learn rather than to react to everything. Which when I first started was I thought my job is like whenever something happens, I've got to react and I've got to be on the front foot and I've got to be offensive. If a deal doesn't work the way I wanted it to, or if this, or if that, or if a partner doesn't want to work with us. But now you're not as reactive, and I think part of that is your success. Your success kind of gives you a bit more confidence to say, well, that's okay. That partner doesn't want to work with us. We move on. A client wants to leave. We'll move on. That's okay. We don't have to fight every fight.
I mean, and you're obviously learning as you're going and not being reactive. The seismic change that we've seen post-pandemic in terms of the world becoming more aware of well-being, of mental health, flexible working. There are old school businesses that look at this and go, "You're just mollycoddling all these people. You're just giving them things for no apparent reason. They should come in 9 to 5 and they should sit on their desk and wear a tie." What do you say to that?
The world has moved on, unfortunately, for them, at the end of the day, we put up with far less,
Yes,
and that's not just in work. You've got the Me Too movement, you've got BLM, you've got,
100%.
all of this stuff going on with sustainability and the planet. We're not going to put up with things that aren't good for us as human beings. And so, if an organization is short-sighted enough to say they need to just sit down and shut up and enjoy their employment, then that's great. And enjoy the next 10 years because they'll be the last 10 years of your organization. People are not going to want to work with you. It's just true.
It is true.
They're giving their lives to you as an organization. And a lot of the stuff that you're asking them to do makes no sense, like coming to an office. I remember this whole nonsense about, oh, but collaboration. It's like, really? Because I don't remember walking into ING Bank and seeing 150 people all collaborating all the time. They fucking weren't. They were sitting there sending emails, right?
Depends on the sector. I mean, manufacturing, I couldn't make toilet roll from my house, for instance. But when you're in the creative industries, as you rightly know, Ellie, as you rightly know, if you're in the creative industries and you're having a brainstorm or whatever, really difficult sometimes to do it outside the office, really difficult to do it over Zoom. So I think it does depend on the sector. Your business, I totally understand. Have you got an office?
No.
No, you haven't got an office, but you don't need to have an office, right? You can be international, they can be based anywhere. Manufacturing is ever so slightly different. What do you think the single biggest issue for employers is coming up over the next couple of years then?
It's difficult to narrow it down, but it generally will be around personnel. I mean, first and foremost, there's a couple of things to think about in terms of intersectional trends that as a result of COVID. The first trend will be there will be a recession. There will be in the next sort of 24 months, let's say, or longer, and it will last a long time because there's a hangover from COVID. I mean, COVID hasn't, we've been dealing with the virus, but then there's a lot of other long tail issues that are as a result. What I've learned is in economics, one spark in the 70s will lead to a chain reaction that leads into 40, 50 years. And COVID is just, this is just the beginning.
So if there's going to be a recession, then what's going to happen to you guys? Because people are going to cut.
To us.
People are going to cut giving their employees benefits because they need to look after the mothership and the business. How does that affect Juno?
That's not what we've seen. In fact, the opposite.
Okay.
We've seen the opposite. And that's what investors used to say to us in 2019. This will be the first thing that was cut. We don't lose our clients. 97% retention rate since COVID. Since before COVID, I beg your pardon. So that's not what we've seen. And maybe that's the case for others, but that's not what we've seen. Ultimately, look, you've got the recession that I think is looming. Paying the investment that the states have had to make in keeping people in work, or at least paid, as well as all the other structural things to survive through the pandemic. So that's one challenge. Intersectionally to that, you have this sort of opening of borders, this globalization, and it was already globalized, but even more globalized. So talent is going to be fought tooth and nail for, which is amazing for employees, but not so much for employers. So it's going to be harder to pay people potentially, and harder to find the good people, which makes both of those things interact with each other. And thirdly, I think there'll be for businesses that are perhaps not geared to adapt quickly, might find a lot of challenges because people are just going to vote with their feet. I think what COVID, especially those that were furloughed, what COVID taught a lot of people that were furloughed is that unfortunately you are fairly expendable. You can give your life to a business, and all it takes is for one event that is obviously seismic, um, for you to be told, thanks, but you're you're not essential to the business. So
Commodity.
people kind of
Yeah.
leave that experience
Yeah.
and go, well, I'll just go and live in Morecambe,
Yeah.
and
Morecambe's
go and
nice.
run a
Morecambe's very
little
nice, actually.
little law firm.
Yeah, no, really.
Morecambe is
Fish,
lovely.
fish and chip shop, maybe. That's probably what I'd
See,
do.
see, it's very appealing. It's very appealing to leave the corporate machine.
Except for a fish and chip shop, I'm in. In terms of retaining staff rather than getting rid of staff, culturally, that's really important, as you alluded to earlier. How do you, as a business, build culture from a remote workworkforce?
Yeah, good question. It's not easy, but I don't think it's as hard as people make it out to be. I mean,
Go on. What's the secret sauce?
I wouldn't say there's a secret sauce. I think the main thing is that you try and work on it together. Ultimately, communication is the foundation of any culture. Culture isn't something that you just decide and tell, hey guys, this is a deck that tells you our culture.
Have you got a deck that tells you the culture, though? Surely you do.
Of course not. No. We don't do that. We don't do values. We don't do any of that crap because it's nonsense. It's just not. For me personally, I think it's nonsense. It's inauthentic nonsense.
But can you not buy into a business because of their values, which obviously coincides with the perks and the benefits that you give your employees? Does that not go hand in hand?
Yeah. But those are spoken values, and I have to put them on a board. Ultimately, what we value is hard work, passion, collaboration, and openness, and those values are things that you can pick up on when you're hiring someone, rather than saying, "These are our values. What are your values?"
So you do have
that's
values.
just my personal.
So you do have values then, but you just don't communicate them. But you just
Yeah,
have them.
we have values the same way I have values, but I don't put my values on LinkedIn.
No.
I don't write them down. They're not tattooed on my arm. The point is that culture is something that you build. When you talk about culture in the traditional sense, so let's talk about the bloody Iraqi culture.
Right.
Iraqi culture is something that was built almost non-verbally. Well, obviously there's writing and literature and music and all that, but that comes after years and years and years and years. And it's not like the culture man is, the head of culture says, "Hey guys, this is the culture." It's a collaborative thing that you build over time. And that's what we try to do.
But when starting a business, when it's one or two people, surely you go into that business, that startup, with a vibe, with an element of culture that you want to disseminate when you're hiring people. You want people to come on board based on the culture of that business, whether you've got grass on the walls or pigs in a greenhouse.
No, at that stage, it's just you.
Right.
At that stage, people want to work with you.
So how does that culture become a thing? Remotely, how does that culture become a thing?
When we talk about culture, you mentioned grass on the walls. It's important to also kind of denote what culture is. To me, culture is how you treat each other and what you expect of each other and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. In other words, my culture in this business, our culture in this business, is that people have autonomy, right? And people are treated like adults. And so you can just say, you can give them, that's not a culture deck. That's just, this is how we work. Another thing is that we don't micromanage each other. It's important that, because I've been in organizations where I've been micromanaged to death and it's been painful. So, it's not, for me, I don't think about culture as do you have, lunch and learns, and do you meet up every morning and have a chat and have a coffee, because that's just dogmatic. Well, I think about culture as, do we get on with each other?
Yes.
Do we feel respected? Do we feel valued? Do we feel seen? Do we feel heard? Is the culture that we have, whether it's the way we speak about our customers, the way that we speak about our members, the way we speak about our brands, the way, that's all the stuff that kind of just gets built over time, I suppose. And I get that you're, what you're getting at, which is that's not scalable. You have to codify it in some way if you're going to hire more people. And of course, there are ways to do that. But, ultimately, if you get hired to a job and you get given a Notion page that tells you all about the company culture, is that really how, it's like, surely that the culture needs to be felt and something that you pick up on and you assimilate to, rather than, right, here's a handbook. be this.
Subjectively, I suppose culture is a difficult one to qualify, but in terms of what success looks like, which is far, far easier because you'll have a perception yourself, what does success look like for you in the next couple of years?
Well, I mean, look, I would like Juno to be to fulfill its dream of becoming a category creator, and what that means in layman's terms is actually changing the way that we look at how we interact with our employer. And if that becomes a ubiquitous, method, and it inspires other businesses, even if they compete with us in the end, I'm happy with that, because I want to, leave this project in the next 10 to 15 years and look back and go, well, before we existed, this was done this way, and now it's done a completely different way, and we are now the standard. And I also love to see Juno becoming. I'd love to see Juno becoming a kind of ubiquitous consumer brand as well. A brand that employees have brand awareness. There's how almost like a household name. To say like Slack, for example. I want Juno to be seen as the kind of brand or business that you can use in down the pub, and people will know what you're talking about.
In terms of you personally, then, Ali, what does that look like? Is it financial reward? Is it making sure that your team are looked after? Is it going to Aruba?
It's a difficult question to answer, but frankly, I want to, whatever happens with the company, I want to feel like at the end of that experience and journey, that I learned a hell of a lot, and enough to equip me to do whatever my next chapter of my life is. I think it's important to stick to what you're doing. To keep the passion, you have to look at it as you kind of, I know this is a bit of a cliche, but you can't, kind of like a student, right? It's like, okay, what did I learn in that experience, and so on and so forth. So personally, it would be great to feel like I've just been through a very rigorous PhD of building a business, right? And that, I think, will be the best thing I could ask for, because that kind of negates the need to be successful, in quotes, because it's up to you to decide whether or not you're happy with the effort that you put in. And I do really like Porsches, so I'd quite like to get one of those, but that's an additional thing.
You like Porsches? See, I really don't like you now because I hate Porsches.
Really?
But that's okay. Yeah, we'll move on from that point. How do I find Juno as an employer or an employee? How can I use your platform?
Yeah, so our website has everything you could possibly need. I mean, the website is withjuno.com, so withjuno.com. Of course, we have a little quiz on the website which shows if Juno is right for you as an employer. Fill it in, and you'll be able to reach out to one of us, and we'll learn a bit more about you and about your challenges, I suppose.
Ali, I've genuinely enjoyed the conversation. Best of luck buying the Porsche. Maybe go for the electric one because you get tax benefits on that one. Again, a possible perk.
I might do that.
I'll speak to you soon, Ali. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, dude. Thanks for listening. Coming up next week.
Quite quickly, it's been evident what I'm good at and what I'm not good at.
Go on, what are you bad at?
I can make a perfume, no problem. Can I fill a bottle and make sure it doesn't leak? I did try that very briefly and I was warned off doing that.
How hard can it be to just put some liquid in a bottle?
That's what I was told when all my bottles leaked.
Right.
That's exactly the comments that were made to me.
Thank you so much to our headline sponsors for the year, Capsule Cover. Capsule Cover, a specialist insurance partner to growth businesses, supports some of the UK's most innovative and ambitious companies. Sponsoring each and every one of our podcasts, we're on a journey with Capsule, and so should you be. If you're a scale-up or an ambitious, high-growth business, check out how Capsule Cover can help you with bespoke insurance solutions. Inquire via capsulecover.com and quote Success22. See you next week, 8 a.m. on all podcast platforms. Simply subscribe or ask your smart speaker to play Success is in the Mind podcast. This is a Pinpoint Media podcast presented by me, Oliver Bruce, produced by Dan Miller and Fergus Bruce, edited and designed by Harry Fox and Victoria Bramwell, filmed by Madeline Harris, marketed by Ellie Hanwell and Rachel Buchanan Hughes, and managed by Bethan Wyatt and Annabelle Lawton-Smith. Quite a team. Thanks, guys. If you know anyone you think we should interview, if you want to tell your story or have your say, please reach out to me directly via podcast@pinpoint-media.co.uk. Remember, there's never a good time to start a business, but in business, you should always have a good time. Cheers, guys.